As city clerk, I will use my voice to advocate for technology to help you access city information more easily and effectively. I am currently working with city management on innovative new software to improve speed, public access, and transparency. I will also ensure you continue to receive excellent customer service, something you have come to expect from your city clerk's office. I am passionate that the city clerk remain independent to serve the public. As the liaison between you, city management, and the council members, I will preserve an office that provides transparent, objective, and unbiased service. You entrust your city clerk to permanently record the decisions of city leaders, the building blocks of your representative local government. As city clerk, I will work to earn and keep your trust to do just that.
Vote Marianne Tracy, November 3rd.
Good evening. As most of you know, I'm Anne-Marie McKay, candidate for Laguna Beach City Clerk. Thank you, South Laguna Civic Association, for hosting this forum. I'm running because I've got the skills, I've got the experience, and I'm dedicated to public service. And I can bring the Laguna Beach City Clerk's office into the future while ensuring that transparency is improved and unbiased, excellent assistance is provided to everyone. I have the proven skills and knowledge to leverage technology to improve transparency, access, and efficiency. Please go to my website, mckayforcityclerk.com, to learn more about exactly how I'm going to do that for you. Thank you.
With all of that in place, let's get started. The first question is question 5 from your packet, having to do with fire. While there are multiple potential sources of disaster for our community, wildfire is widely considered to be the most serious single threat, and it is generally accepted that the danger is increasing. While the city has taken many actions to counter the threat, we believe that more are necessary. What actions do you believe the city should take to increase its defenses against wildfires, while at the same time protecting the integrity and long-term health of the Greenbelt? George, please go first. George? Oh, he's muted, Daniel.
Okay.
There you go.
I thought you guys unmute me and I don't unmute.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
Well, thank you. Thanks for organizing this South Laguna Candidates Forum, James and the rest of the crew, and for putting together such a thorough package of information on the issues. So I think, my answer to that question, it's a very challenging problem and it's never going to be solved completely. Fire is a risk that we face every single day during the dry season and sometimes during the winter. So the issue of, I think grasses mentioned in there, particularly that are problematic. These are European grasses that have invaded for a very long time and are the greatest risk to fire danger. So we need to continue to use the goat herds, but use them well. What we've done is we brought in goats after the seeding takes place of plants, not just the grasses, but others. And we need to have a better management of the goat system so that they come in earlier and that we actually try to seed those areas with native plants, which are much more fire retardant than the grasses and the other plants, including mustard. So I would say that those practices need to continue. We also need man-made crews in there as well. There's no silver bullet. The greatest positive impact we could have on fire safety is hardening your home. Replacing fire-prone roofs.
30 seconds.
Metal or other non-flammable materials we can keep fire from starting. Securing vents, screening, gutters, less wood around the house. We need incentives to do that from the city. The California Insurance Commission is creating new provisions for insurance companies, requiring them to provide lower premiums to homeowners to harden their homes to increase fire safety. We need to do the same as a city to assure that our homes are safe. Thank you.
Ruben, quick side note, you're going to have to unmute yourselves. I guess Daniel doesn't have that control.
Okay. Yes, thank you also for providing such a lengthy dialogue here. There's an article in February 2017 of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and the title of it is "Decrease Wildfires by Choosing the Right Plants." We're hearing more and more that the only way to decrease fire is by cutting down plants. And really, we need to take a look at the opportunity to plant the plants that will slow down the fires. We found that in the canyon during the fires that the eucalyptus and other large trees were ember catchers, and they stopped the embers from flying across. Whenever we have grass fires, that's the issue, is these embers fly for hundreds of feet and then catch the grass on fire. So I would advise everybody, it's February 2017, the US Department of Agriculture, and it's all about how we can defend our own homes and how the city also can. Another way that the city can is there's something called hydro seeding. I'd like the city to get on a program where we hydro seed every year a different section of the town, and that way we can actually plant these slopes, like right behind the city hall. There's a slope that if you look, there's a dividing line where it's completely dry and then a rocky side on the other. We can do things to make our town safer, and we should do that immediately.
30 seconds.
We also want, just as George said, we want to make our house as hard as we can, as defensible as we can. So taking away any of the old firewood that's next to a open field. We need to just take a look at our own yards and make sure that each one of the residents in our town is doing what we can to make each individual home less fire prone. Thank you.
Time.
Larry, you're up.
Thanks, James, and thanks to South Laguna Civic for hosting us tonight. A couple of years ago, there was the fire that kind of swept up in the Woods Canyon Wilderness Park, and I live up in top of the world, and as many of you know, and I to see that thing kind of storm through the canyon and then sweep up towards SLCA, and then just with the minor wind shift, it could have swept up toward top of the world, and it could have devastated that whole area in a hurry. It brought to mind that the best way to manage this, or one thing that we really need to look after, I'm not going to say it's the best way, but vegetation management, which reduces the fuel that's available to wildfire. And I think that we've studied this, and we've decided that hand modification of fuel management zones is effective, and also grazing, that those are the two best. We've considered other types: mechanical removal, chemical and biological methods, and controlled burns, none of which fit well within our community. So we need to really focus on the vegetation management issue through the approved methods of hand modification and grazing. The second issue has to do with vegetation modification around houses, and with vegetation modification in yards and in yard designs. One thing that I've noticed is great to be able to say, well, let's harden our houses and all that stuff, but going around the South Laguna neighborhoods, a lot of those houses are wooden houses, and it's not exactly easy to armor them. So let's focus on major vegetation management zones and fuel modification in our own yards. Thank you.
Steve, you're up.
Thank you, and as the others have, I want to thank South Laguna Community Association for hosting this event and providing ahead of time. The questions are very comprehensive, but by providing it, it gave everybody a good chance to be prepared. I think it's very important when we discuss this issue that we not be reinventing the wheel. The city has done an extraordinary amount of work in this area, particularly over the last few years, inspired by some events that had occurred. And there's been an incredible amount of work done by the Environmental Sustainability Committee, the Fire Department, and Bob Whalen in particular. And there's been a 3-phase plan that was adopted. It includes all the things the other candidates were talking about, hardening, vegetation management, knowing the right types of plants. And we are phasing this in. Phase 1 has already been funded and is in the process of being implemented. Phase 2, however, is very expensive, and it may not be possible and affordable to do it all at one time. We may have to phase phase 2 in over time and just determine which are the highest priorities and which are ones that can be delayed while we're able to provide the financing for it. As far as environmental impact, and I think George was mentioning this as well, we've largely used goats and hand crews. Goats are very good generally, but we have to have a good hand crew program for the environmentally sensitive area. One of the key points in my campaign,
30 seconds.
one of the key points in my campaign is we need to do a better job of protecting our natural wildlife and our natural vegetation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We are now going to show you a few videos that are popular on social media that will give you a window into some of the things that are happening in the beaches in South Laguna.
Go. Go, go, go. Hurry. Yeah. Come on. Let's go. Okay. Go. Ready? Not shallow as fuck, but okay. 3, 2, 1. Hey, got me up, bro. Come on, you got this shit. Go, 3, 2, 1,
Okay, so this is question 1, having to do with tourist impacts, and you can see some of the stuff we've been interfacing with down here in South Laguna. Despite the great difficulty of access, the beaches of South Laguna are under continuously increasing pressure from visitors, leading to the degradation of the natural environment, near gridlock of the street system, and growing amounts of visitor misbehavior. What solutions do you advance to balance the pressures of visitors against the need to protect the environment and to mitigate the impacts of visitors on the local community? Steve, you're first.
Thank you. This is probably the biggest issue in the entire city. And it's not just, I wish it were only in one area of town, but it's not. It's in North Laguna and has been for many years as well as in South Laguna. And it's a very difficult problem because of various issues that relate to the Coastal Commission. But we do have a land use element that deals with this issue. And the basic idea is to create a situation where visitors are directed to certain areas and deterred from areas that are negatively impacting our neighborhoods and coastal resources. This plan has been approved by the Coastal Commission, and I am going to be introducing an agenda item to make this move forward faster. However, we also need to have more parking facilities throughout town so that we can have a neighborhood parking program so that visitors aren't able to go into the neighborhoods and park and therefore be walking around in the area. We also need more personnel for enforcement. And our police department will never have enough personnel in order to enforce everything. We need to have more creative solutions, that something along what we've done in the promenade and with the closure of Forest Avenue, where we have security, but it's not being provided by the police department itself. It becomes something that's affordable, and it becomes something that's effective. And so we need a combination of parking solutions as well as enforcement solutions.
Larry, you're next.
Thanks, James. You know, this is a tough one, and I wish we did have more power to control it. And you know, unfortunately, these beaches are public beaches, and they're state beaches, and they're open access beaches. But still, we need to be able to protect ourselves. And one of the things, and by the way, I hope those were all visitors that were lighting themselves on fire and jumping off of rocks. I didn't notice any local guys, but you never know. Recently, the council attempted to raise revenues by revising the parking fees. That went to the Coastal Commission. It was agreed to by staff, but it was shot down by the commission. I think we need to make a new push now to get the attention of the commissioners to say, listen, this is having an impact on our city. And if we don't have the revenues to be able to take care of it, and I'm talking about patrolling, I'm talking about the ability to have, beach patrols on South County beaches, have the funding for that, as Steve mentioned, that money's got to come from somewhere, and it's got to come from a revenue source. And so we need to figure that out, but we need to get the support of the Coastal Commission to absolutely do that. I would like to see next time there's a vacancy on the Orange County Parks, the extension that there's joint jurisdiction. I would love to see a representative from
30 seconds.
I would love to see a representative from South Laguna fill that position, work with Supervisor Bartlett's office to see if we can't promote that, because these impacts are horrendous. I agree with Steve with regard to the adding parking. I would like to add some bathrooms, and I would like to add some places for people to put their garbage so that they're not going in the yards, both bathroom and garbage. So those are my comments. Thanks, James.
Ruben, you're next. Ruben, you need to unmute. Sorry.
Once again, the question that's posed is a little off because it speaks about the difficulty of access. One of the issues is that we haven't made it difficult to access. What if we had beach closures? There's a gate at 1,000 Steps. How often is it used, and when can we use it? And is there a way to close off other beaches? What is legal in this parameter and what isn't legal in this parameter? And I see you shaking your head, Steve, and yet there's a gate on 1,000 Steps. What if we only had the beaches open during lifeguard hours, where we can actually secure, or at least more secure, the patrolling of the area? We do have to balance revenues and use. The use of the county, the use of the city, funds together. How can we more wisely manage the maintenance of the areas? We could put more trash cans up top, more trash cans down below. We are speaking about bathrooms. Right now we have it at Aliso, we have 1,000 Steps. We had porta potties over at West, but they're gone during COVID. So we do need to figure out ways that we can better manage these people that are coming through. West Street needs more parking for the residents. How can we manage that? How can we manage that the residents themselves are the people that we're looking after first? We need to make sure that we're looking after our city first before we're looking after the tourists. These county beaches do make it difficult because they are managed both between the city and the county. Thank you.
George, you're up.
Hi, thank you. I think we all know that our South Laguna beaches are being loved to death, and the wrong kind of love. the swarm of visitors that come in are being promoted to visit South Laguna beaches. They park in your neighborhood, swim and dive, and in areas that require more skills than they probably have. That's a tragedy for those who've been injured and killed. We've seen 4 deaths. So we have to do something. I know in the 70s, there was a key card being used at the 1,000 steps. So that can't be done because these are county beaches. So we have this relationship with the county and the Coastal Commission that needs to be addressed. And what I'd like to see us is stop fighting the Coastal Commission. We've been called among the worst offenders by the executive director of the Coastal Commission. Last year, there were 12 projects appealed, and 11 of them were sanctioned because they violated our own local coastal plan. Many examples of that if you want them. That needs to stop. If we're going to work with the Coastal Commission to manage the visitors, we're going to have a good relationship with them. And the same thing for the county. If we do cost sharing with the county or take over the beaches, enforcement has to be beefed up, primarily using the beach patrol resources, but police as well. South Laguna residents should know there's adequate enforcement of city ordinances prohibiting alcohol, smoking, littering, and everything else. We have the money, but not the political will. And we need to educate the visitors. How do we do that? We have to find ways of doing that. And Visit Laguna. Do we really need to advertise our beaches on Visit Laguna to bring in more visitors? I think not. We need to find solutions for parking, metering on Coast Highway, perhaps into the neighborhoods, but we have to have a good relationship with Coastal so we can get those resources back and get some money back from the tourists who wreak havoc with South Laguna. Thank you.
For the next question, which is question 4 from your packet, we will hear from Alex Runagi, a part of the ever engaged youth in South Laguna and one of our scholarship winners.
My name is Alex Runagi, and I'm a lifelong resident of South Laguna. I feel lucky to have been able to grow up surrounded by beautiful beaches. It's critical that we protect our ocean to ensure that future generations can enjoy it. We cannot take our environment for granted. The city is on record as an active proponent of a widely supported project to recreate the estuary at the mouth of Aliso Creek, right behind me. This project would restore an entire ecosystem and assist in reducing the levels of surface water pollution currently being discharged into the ocean. What actions do you believe the city should take to strengthen its support for this project and to speed up its implementation? Thank you very much.
George, you get to go first on this one.
Okay, thank you. I support the restoration of the estuary. It's really a moral obligation because over the years that's been severely degraded with acres and acres and acres of arundo. And this isn't just a Laguna issue, it's also a county issue because that water, that flowage, or what you call the watershed, comes from way up in Aliso and comes to us, and it's polluted. And we need to address that. So we also need to work with the county and the state perhaps to do that. We also have, the Blue Belt, and we have the Laguna Ocean Foundation working on this. So we do need private funding to do it. So with all partners working together, I think we can fund it. The city's role should be to fund it where we can, but it's not something that we can do alone. Thank you.
Steve, you get to go next.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, I was a very, very early proponent of doing the estuary restoration. I was appointed to the subcommittee of the City Council to work on this with Rob Zorschmied. We've been working very closely with the county and particularly with Ed Almanzo. Ed is the inspiration and the horsepower behind this. We are working cooperatively with all the agencies. We are not the lead agency, but because we were involved, we don't have the Army Corps of Engineers, which had originally come in offering to put up a lot of money and do a totally wretched, environmentally insensitive project. Instead, we took it on ourselves, working with the county, again, with Ed's group, with Hallie Jones's group, and the city. And the city is putting up money to be helpful in this. We are on course. We have a so to speak, a calendar going along with this, and we are on pace right now to get this done.
Larry, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, James. I strongly support continuing the city's leadership on the important work to restore the estuary. I want to support also working with Supervisor Bartlett's office, Orange County Lifeguards, the Ocean Foundation, and other partners to advance the project. One of the issues, and this has been brought to my attention, I was always aware of it, but Mike Beenan has made sure that I have not forgotten about it over the last 3 weeks. And that is, I support the increased signage and enforcement to prevent skimboarders from digging out the berm that creates a stream of water into the ocean. This happens regularly, and it undermines the restoration efforts and endangers public health, and it releases millions of gallons of polluted water into the ocean. We just need key leadership on the city level to make sure that it goes forward. But the Aliso Beach sand berm is really a protective element of this, and it prevents this inland pollution from reaching the ocean. And I think it's something that we really need to focus on. So I'm in favor, very much in favor, in continuing our role and making sure this happens and redoubling our efforts to make sure that that berm is protected. Thank you.
Ruben, you can finish this one up.
Yes, it's beautiful to try and recreate something, but we have to realize that there's no such thing as recreating something and then having it work as it did originally, because we're not at the space of what was original. So really, we have to recreate it to a better environment. And an estuary is a very, very delicate ecosystem. The trees that were originally there aren't there anymore. The cliffs are now eroding. So it's a different animal than it was before. And thank goodness we do have scientists that will support the correct redevelopment of that particular estuary. Along with the estuary work, we're also looking at the walkway that'll take you from the beach all the way into the canyon as well. So it's a combination of those two efforts. And one of the reasons that they're important is we're finding that we as a population need to be outdoors more. We need to stop being inside buildings and inside convention centers. We need to be outside walking and taking a part of the environment. So I would put this on a priority. And regarding the sand berm, I don't know that that's number one as priority. Obviously, each one of these elements that we go to speak of, it's requiring more and more supervision, policing, whatever word you want to use. And where are those funds going to come from?
30 seconds.
We need to take a look at a larger ability to get volunteers. And our city can do a lot of that by looking for a volunteer force that would support in helping to manage all of these resources. Our environment is so hugely important to Laguna Beach. We really have to do something to save the environment. Thank you.
Okay, related question. This is question 3. All of Laguna's wastewater, along with wastewater from other cities, is processed in the coastal treatment plant in Aliso Canyon. Every day, nearly 2 million gallons of treated but still contaminated water is discharged into the ocean 1.5 miles off the coast. The plant is old and in need of upgrading. Meanwhile, large flows of untreated surface runoff are being released by the breaking of the sand berm at the mouth of Aliso Creek. What steps do you think the city should take to end the current inertia over the upgrading of the coastal treatment plant, to address long-standing deferred maintenance of the city's sewage infrastructure, and to protect the ocean from the release of tainted water from Aliso Creek? Ruben, you get to go first.
Well, I feel like we've all touched on this from the last question. It's somewhat redundant, but once again, the environment is so very important. So we need to put our best foot forward. We obviously need to take a look at what even national, the Pacific Ocean doesn't necessarily belong to Laguna Beach. So what can we get on as a national support to also make sure that we're putting as much money forward to this particular projects. The amount of people that are at Liso Beach in and of itself would help to show the need. That's probably one of our biggest beaches as far as population goes, and the one that's most often filled first. So we need to put our best foot forward and make sure that this is handled and managed.
Larry, you're next.
Thanks, James. This is a big question, and I am not a sewer treatment plant or wastewater expert. And this is the type of thing that I would really rely on experts to educate me about. Recently, again, as in addition to talking about the berm at Liso Beach, Mike Beenan was good enough to send me some articles with regard to wastewater treatment, sewage treatment, cutoff of wastewater and sewage before it ever made its way out to the discharge pipe out into the ocean, and rerouting those waters so that they could maybe benefit us in terms of creating more defensible, using it to create more defensible space. And things of that nature. This is great technology and it's there, but I just don't understand enough about it or its costs to see whether or not it could be implemented. But this is something that honestly needs attention. We've spent a ton of money on sewer systems. We have sewage. I was listening to a discussion the other day about hooking up and making a unified sort of sewage servicing district. Lots has to be done in this area. I'm not an expert. There are a lot of great ideas and a lot of great technologies, and that is something I would be interested in exploring to see if we could get a solution. That pipe draining into the ocean doesn't seem like a solution. Thank you.
George?
Okay, let me unmute. Sorry about that. Okay, am I unmuted yet? Okay, unmute.
You just muted yourself again. You were there. Hit it again, George.
Well, I understand that. I'm not as smart as I look. Okay, let me just say this. A faulty sewer valve caused the most recent sewage bill in November 2019. The $2 or $3 million fine that the EPA is likely to assess Laguna Beach should be a wake-up call. For 20 years, the city's dragged its feet and now allocated the money to upgrade our sewer system or our sewer infrastructure or our wastewater treatment plant, where it's going in its last stages of life. We know that. Sewer rates are up. And as Michael Moore has pointed out, the current rate of increase by 2030 costs you $1 to flush your toilet. So we have to upgrade our coastal treatment plant. The plant's entering its end of life. We may not want to go it alone, so we need to look for partners, private or public, to whom we can outsource this service or work with them. If that's not possible, we need to rebuild. And I hate to say it, but if we need to use bonds to finance that, we should. We can't have another 4 million gallons of waste coming into our ocean. This is raw sewage. This isn't about technology, about common sense. We also have to do more to conserve water. So instead of sending our treated water into the ocean, we should consider spending money to take water treatment to the next level, which is toilet to table, not necessarily in that order. Now, so this approach is more environmentally sound while consuming an increasingly scarce resource. So that's my plans. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you. I agree with some things that Larry was saying, that council members and council candidates simply don't have the expertise to know the total solutions to these things. But we do have procedures and people in place that can solve these problems. I'm the liaison to the Environmental Sustainability Committee, and it's a position I take very seriously, and I go to the meetings and I actively participate, not only with the group itself, but with subcommittees that get formed. And this is an area where we're very fortunate to have Mike Beenan. And Mike Beenan has been a member of the committee, and he's now a member of the subcommittee on wastewater. And I look to Mike as I have for many years, to have the substantive answers. He's very clever and creative on these things, and we need to move in the directions that Mike and the committee recommend. When the subcommittee comes to the full committee, then the full committee debates things, comes forward with a suggestion, and brings it to the council. And as far as funding for these things, for a 20-year period from 1975 to 1995, the city did not put any money into the sewer systems. We have, over the last 25 years, put tens of millions of dollars. We're still in a catch-up mode, but we've gone from a place where our water grade by the state was a D or an E in all categories, so now we're A and A pluses in all categories. I think we've done a pretty good job on the catch-up.
Thank you, Steve. Let's see here. Oh, now we will hear from Julia Henry, who will be asking you question 9 with regard to community participation in land use decisions.
Hi, my name is Julia Henry, and I've been a South Laguna Beach resident for my entire life. I'm this year's recipient of the SLCA Maury Granger Scholarship, and I'm a current freshman at Occidental College who's studying diplomacy and world affairs. I first noticed the problem of the lack of sidewalks along PCH in South Laguna as a child watching pedestrians cross in front of my parents' vehicle to access their vehicles and our local beaches. My parents didn't allow me to walk down to the beach by myself for fear of getting hit by oncoming traffic. Thus, my question for you is, the city is contributing $10 million towards a Caltrans project to provide an accessible path of travel that meets minimum federal standards for handicap access along one side of Coast Highway. Do you believe that a 4-foot wide path will be adequate to address the safety of pedestrians on Coast Highway? And do you favor the city's current hands-off approach to the design of the project? Or would you advocate for a more comprehensive design and more community involvement in the project? Thank you.
Larry, you're first.
There it is. Thanks, James. So I've been watching the construction of the sidewalks and the footpathways up along Temple Hills Drive, and I think they've been a tremendous addition. I'm not sure what the width on those sidewalks is, but I think it's about 4 feet. I think a 4-foot width is adequate for a sidewalk. I believe a sidewalk ultimately is a sidewalk. I'm not sure that it's one. The thing that concerns me is we desperately need sidewalks and walking areas along Coast Highway in South Laguna, and we need safe places to park. The one thing that's really concerning, and it's been happening a lot this summer, as Julia said, was the people that just cross the street anywhere they want to because there's no real well-defined place to cross the street. I was heading down there this morning, and there were people walking in the island in the median strip, just kind of walking down the street with beach chairs and you know, whatever they had. So something's got to be addressed. But we need to have a walkway. I think a 4-foot walkway is adequate. I'm not sure that we want to get tied up in a huge design review project because I think that the need for them to go in is really, really important. And, you know, beautification measures can be taken in the design, but I'm not sure that we need to spend a lot of time deliberating on that. I think we just need to get the footpaths in and make it safer for pedestrians.
Ruben? You're muted, Ruben.
There we go. We need to hire Julia. Sounds like she knows what she's talking about. Unfortunately, where she was standing, right there next to those cars, there's not the potential for a 4-foot walkway. So again, putting these maps up on a wall, having the community involved, we need to involve the community. It may be a hassle, it may be a problem, but everybody wants to be heard. So we need to have this community involvement somewhere down in South Laguna where this is going to take place and actually show with photographs and a 3-foot path in some locations, a 2-foot path in some locations. And then what has to happen is the city has to maintain it. Issues with our town is that we do something and then we don't maintain it thereafter. So I agree, there's a lack of infrastructure in South Laguna. But even when you get the sidewalk, they still want to get to the other side of the road. So what are we going to do with that? Should we have a blinking light like over in the canyon so that once every 10 minutes there is a stoppage of traffic and then people can cross during the summer times? How can we facilitate a safe crossing? We know that about that time during the drum circle when someone actually was killed crossing the coast highway. So I think, yes, we absolutely need to do that. And we need to do it sooner than later. And a clearing could start even sooner than later. What happens is when you're looking at foliage or the issue, you stop looking at traffic. And then that's when someone gets hurt. So we have to make the facilities now, even if it's just a clearing, so that people are safe. That's our number one concern, is safety. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you. I think it's time that we adopt a new paradigm in this town. And that paradigm is that we consider walking, and more importantly, walkability, to be something that's of high value to us, as high value as many other of things that matter to us, like the environment. And I think that that's come clear through the COVID situation. And as a result, I don't think we start with what's feasible. We start with, here's what we want, and we figure out how to make that feasible. And that might mean that we have to have wider than 4 feet, because if we want families to be walking along there, which is what I do want, then I think it may have to be 8 to 10 feet. We may lose some parking as a result, but it would be worth it in order to get the walkability that's needed. And I understand Larry's point about 4 feet in Temple Hills. Temple Hills is a different situation. That's more of getting from one place to another, and it does have exercise involved, don't misunderstand. But walkability along Coast Highway, man, I have walks with friends where I go from Crescent Bay out to about Surf and Sand. I want to be able to walk all the way to 3 Arch Bay. It's not safe to do that now. I had to take a walk a few years ago from the Gelson Center to a friend on 9th Street. Thought I was going to get killed. We have to change our approach to things. This is a town that cares about walkability. We need to be able to provide it. And therefore, an answer to the more specific question, we need to have a stronger hand in dealing with Caltrans on getting this project done. Thank you.
Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I'm not sure. I agree with Steve. We can't, building walkability on coast highways, that's kind of a man in the moon project. It's so noisy, dangerous, and polluted that I'd never want to do that. I mean, there's one option here. We could take over control of Coast Highway. We could slow down cars if we wanted to. We could create more crosswalks if we wanted to. That requires money. And we could probably do it. And we probably have the money to do it. As your question and your background mentioned, James, $10 million is a lot of money that we're contributing to this project. I've not thought about the issue of the width, but I'm always in favor of community input when projects affect any neighborhood or our town and we're paying into the project. I mean, it's likely that foot traffic in some places would need a wider sidewalk, but most of them would probably be okay. And that's what the federal standard is. But we need to be involved. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we're going to go into the governance section. This is question 11 on your packet. On a per capita basis, South Laguna contributes more tax revenue to the city than the average for the rest of the city. And some South Lagunans believe that we do not receive our fair share of city services and investment. How would you seek to balance the allocation of city resources more equitably among neighborhoods? And in particular, how would you address the specific problems of South Laguna? George, you're up first on this one.
Okay. South Laguna represents 18% of the population of our city. So I would be in favor of a very common sense and logical solution here. You're not going to get your fair share until you get your fair share of representation. And that would mean district council elections, whereby South Laguna had its own city council representative. And each of our 5 neighborhoods would have their own city council representative. That will go a long way to solving the problem of adequate representation and address problems specific to South Laguna. There should be an annual financial report card too that shows how the city is spending its money in each neighborhood. That report card should show spending by category where it makes sense for public services, parks, landscapes, infrastructure, roadway maintenance. Of course, downtown is a special case, but spending on downtown projects has gotten out of balance. I've been criticized for saying the city wants to spend 14 million to spiff up downtown when only 1.6 million was approved. One needs only to look at the past behavior to predict future behavior. Spending for a $16 million parking lot that will be mostly used by city employees seems like a rash expenditure during COVID. But the initial study funded by dark money was approved, and another million or so has been allocated for more studies. Do you think a parking structure will be approved? I think so, based on the patterns of decisions being made. So we need to balance these things, and we need to know that each neighborhood is getting their fair share. That's not going to happen until you have better representation.
Larry, you're up.
Thanks, James. Yeah, there's some issues that are really distinct to South Laguna. I was listening to, this issue was brought up, I think, in a recent city council meeting where Chief Farinella addressed the issue of response times to South Laguna. And I think it was her opinion that the response times were adequate and that they were in line with response times to other areas. And I think the same was correct of the fire issues. I think the issues that we have in South Laguna are a tiny bit different. And some of it, as we discussed earlier, currently involves the intense popularity of the beaches down there, probably courtesy of social media. I don't think that's going to stop, by the way. I think that that's going to be a continuing thing. It involves parking, it involves restroom facilities, it involves garbage facilities. But there's a city responsibility and there's a county responsibility, because a lot of this involves city and county jointly managed areas. And I think it might be time for us to perhaps have a city and county task force to take a look at the specific South Laguna issues that relate to the recreational uses, street uses, traffic uses, and see if we can't come up with some way to get some county help in jointly resolving all of these matters. Thanks.
Steve?
Okay, thank you. First of all, as far as balancing the allocation more equitably among neighborhoods, I think that when we look at how we spend, it ought to be based on the needs of a particular area, rather than saying, well, we're 20% of the population, we should get 20% of the revenue. I think it needs to be based more on what the needs are. And as far as moving towards districting, I think that's a terrible idea. We are one community. There's no better way to divide a community than to have council members who feel that their allegiance is to their district and not to the city as a whole. How do we determine what the needs of a particular area are? I don't think we've done a good job with that. And I think we do that the way you do that is to have a new city committee consisting of people that are in fact geographically dispersed and do represent that area, and work together to determine what the needs are in each area, what the priorities should be, and then bring that forward as a recommendation to the council during and prior to budget time. Thank you.
Ruben.
It's kind of a joke to say that we need to be equitable with South Laguna. It's almost like what we need to do is just pour a lot of money into South Laguna first and then come back to downtown. It's really lacking in so many infrastructure items. Like their cell service, their signal is so weak. It's challenging. And given that everybody relies on their phone so much, even to communicate with their families, to not have a good signal is appalling. We're talking about sidewalks, we're talking about curbs, we're talking about signals and signs. If you look at some of the roads in South Laguna, all items that need to be looked at. So at the last Can Do forum, Penelope Penny mentioned how the city, and I think it was both Steve and Bob were on the council at the time, overlooked the water issue of mapping the water in the canyon. And she sternly said, "You forgot about us." So if there isn't representation from these individual areas of town, what happens is they get overlooked by the loud screamers at city council who are saying things that may not have a priority. I would like to have a priority board in city council chambers, and that everybody in town is able to look at that board, so that when something is brought up on January the 4th, it doesn't get tucked away as unimportant 2 years later. But we put it up there and we let everybody look that South Laguna needs this, and the Canyon needs this, and North Laguna needs this, so that we keep it in our eyes and not lose sight of it just because there's a screamer on board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the next question we're going to do is question 6. The city has recently purchased 2 vacant lots at the corner of PCH and Catalina Street, and there are several options for their use. What uses do you consider most appropriate for these lots? And how would you involve the neighbors and the adjacent community in the process of determining their final use? Ruben, you can go first.
That lot is a very important lot. We were all kind of happy when it got secured by the city. In looking at the fire station and looking at the potential uses for this lot and looking at its prime location of being on Coast Highway, my thought is that we probably need to go first to rehabilitate the existing fire station rather than move it to this particular lot. There's quite a large area there where the existing fire station is, and even some space on the side that seems to be not being used, where we could better make use of the spaces already allotted. We are obviously lacking in bathroom facilities. It would be natural for this to be, a portion of this to be used in that way. And then it's probably best to have a town hall meeting with everybody in South Laguna and put a hat out there and everybody put a piece of paper and say, how would you best like to use it? And get the voice of the city into this so that they feel heard. That we should go in there and just say what it is, not very important. I think we need to let the town people mention what they need. As we're having this particular meeting, we all are noticing and highlighting the needs of the South Laguna community. But let's let them say it as well. Thank you.
George?
Well, I think the community has to be involved in these decisions, whether it's through representative groups or directly. South Laguna residents should have a say in how best to use these sites for the betterment of the community. I wouldn't want to make suggestions about this at all, except to say that public safety is the most important service the city provides residents. So that has to be taken into account. Whether that's a better place for a fire station or not, I don't know. But perhaps that's the case. If that is the case, then the existing fire station should be repurposed for community use. That would be a great addition to, as a community center, meeting spot for local groups and other uses. So that's how I would definitely get the community involved in making that decision. And I think it's absolutely necessary. Thank you.
Steve, you're up. You're muted, Steve.
Thank you. I pushed the wrong button and I lost the whole thing. So I apologize. Can you hear me now? Okay. Just a point of fact, the fire department, which has great expertise in these things, have told us that the existing fire station under modern rules and regulations simply cannot meet the needs. And therefore we do have to have another site. I rely on them or their expertise for that, not my own. As far as what to do with any of the lots that we've purchased, you know, this is exactly where community input has to come. And we should probably have a community task force appointed by the community itself and work on what the uses could be. Uses could be things like a community center, a garden, park, maybe even a parking facility of some sort. Not my decision. That would be a better decision for the community to make, taking into account not only the use issues, the feasibility issues, the cost issues, the liability issues, a comprehensive integrated approach and analysis to the question.
Okay, Larry.
Yeah, thanks, James. This is an interesting question. Years ago, there was a where right on Virginia Way, right behind the garden park, where the South Laguna Garden Park is. On that lot where the garden park is, there was a proposed development. It was going to be, I think it was going to read as about 3 stories from the street, and I worked on that with the neighbors on Virginia Way to make sure that didn't go in there. The reason is because it created this monolith wall that completely walled them in, and it was terrible the way that it looked. And when I go down to look at the vacant lot that the city has acquired, I wonder what would go in there and how it would affect those neighbors that are on Monterey, and if that's the best use of that property. Before we did anything with that property, I would want to get a tremendous amount of community input, as much as we possibly could, to see if that's the right choice. Certainly public safety is the big issue, and I agree with Steve that the fire department has taken a look at that, and the existing building does not meet its needs. But perhaps something could be done with the existing building to reconstruct it in a way that it could be made to meet the needs. And I haven't seen yet where that cannot be done. There's already a fire station there. It works. It's of a particular volume. It maybe needs to be bigger, but let's look at it to see if there's more space to improve it. And that would be, I don't know of any other uses for that vacant lot, but right now I think we ought to focus on the ones that are before us and get them solved with community input. Thanks.
Thank you. Got everybody on that. Checking things off as we go here. Okay, so we're going to ask question 7, which sort of ties in with what we were talking about. And this is an issue near and dear to South Laguna Civic Association's heart. Has to do with the community garden in South Laguna. The community garden is a central institution to the citizens of South Laguna, and we are committed to making it a permanent part of the town. What are your views about the use of public funds to help in the acquisition of the garden? What steps would you take to make the acquisition happen? George, you're first.
Who's first?
George is first.
Okay, well, thank you. I love gardens, and I planted them as a volunteer for Transition Laguna when I moved to town. So I built a number of them for people. And I've got fruit trees myself, 12 of them on my property. And I used to grow a garden when I wasn't so busy. But so I believe in the value of gardens. And I would support public and private funding for South Laguna Community Garden Park. Under this plan, I think it should be a 50-50 arrangement. Public funds, the city matches private funding to purchase this land permanently. Of course, we have to find the owner. I'm not volunteering to do that. But I think that's the model, I would say. And that's the model we need to look at for a lot of things we need to get accomplished in the city, from artist work live housing to affordable housing. It has to be a public-private partnership. And that's true of some of the environmental stuff we've talked about today too. So that's my position. Thank you.
Ruben, you're up.
This is my baby. I love this garden. It is what just makes me sing when I'm down in South Laguna, and I don't sing well. It is really something. And I think when anybody goes there, are charmed from the inside out. And there's no reason why we don't have one of these, or we shouldn't have one of these in the 5 different areas of our city. The funding of it, obviously we're in a catch-22 because we can't get the owner to say it's available. I think, Larry, you've gone down as saying that it wasn't something that you wanted to, or you thought that the city should fund. Steve, I think you've been pretty positive on it all the way through. I know that it is an important facet for every community to have, and will be becoming more and more important as we take a look at health issues and how we live our lives. So this is an example for people to learn to take some of these tidbits back to their own personal homes to make their own home gardens beautiful and fruitful and sustainable. It's an example of how we need to be living our lives. So for it to be even a consideration rather than an absolution is really silly to me, because it is an important facet of every community and everybody's life. So I would, as George said, look to both public and private funding, and I would then take advantage of so many lawyers that we have in front of us to help get us there the quickest route. Thank you.
Larry?
Yeah, thanks for this question. I took a tour of the garden with Ryan Goldsmith was generous enough to take me on a walkthrough. I had tried to go down to the garden before on a Saturday, but the gate was closed and there was a sign on it that said gardeners only. And that wasn't offensive, but what it led me to think, and this was out of concern with what I saw when I was there with Ryan, was there were basically, I think Ryan said there were 60 plots there that were administered by 60 separate private owners and not publicly used. The public could walk through, but it wasn't a public space in terms of the use of the plots for the gardening. What I was wondering is, and I've done a little research on it, is how in the world can you take public funds and create a private deal with 60 private gardeners to use? And would you then lose the thing that you really love to do, which is to have that gardening space, which is more like a club to enjoy the way that you want to enjoy it? Now, I asked Ryan if there was a waiting list, and he said that there were 1 or 2 people on that waiting list. But I'm just wondering if the beautiful thing you've got down there, and I love using that land as a garden, I love using that land as a private garden, I just question the ability to be able to go forward with that if you accept public money for it. And that's my concern. There's got to be a way to figure out how to buy this property with a group that wants to buy it, maintain it, retain it as for that use, and let private people garden, let the public walk through and enjoy and look at what you're doing, which is what they do now. Thanks.
Go ahead, Steve.
Thank you. I am an unequivocal supporter of the community garden. I have been since 2012 when I first walked it on my own and fell in love with the spot. After I got elected in 2012, I got together with Ann Kristoff and said, let's figure out what to do, because the prior council had just rejected the purchase of the land. And we came up with a plan which basically said that the city would match the garden's ability, well, the people behind the garden's ability to raise money, and we would match it dollar for dollar, right now up to $500,000. I fully believe in public support for this project. And what's important is to understand why we need this. Yes, it's beautiful. Yes, it's fun for people, but it's not the garden part that I care about. It's the community part. Part of the major purpose of government is to bring people together. There's never been a time in our history when we needed more to bring people together. That's what this community garden does. They have events, they have education. It is for the entire community, and it has brought people together. It's gotten them out of their houses, gotten them off of the internet, and it's gotten them to know and care about and look after each other. That's why I support the garden.
Thank you all. So we're going to go back to some things that you guys have touched on a little bit. We'll give you a little further opportunity to delve a little deeper. This is question 8. If the existing fire station is replaced on another site, the city would then need to decide the fate of the current building or of the land on which it sits. If the fire station is relocated, what uses do you think should be considered for the vacated site's future? And Larry, you're first on this one.
I think that any use that the community would deem fitting for that repurposing of that building would be the appropriate way to go. I don't know if if the community wants a dance hall or a meeting room, or I don't know, but it would definitely be up to them. They may want to have a commercial space with some kind of a food truck type of use, or just various vendors, or they may want to just have a gathering place. They may want to have a place where they could have a community meeting room. There are all kinds of uses that could go there, but it ought to be the people who live in the area and who would use it. It's a unique spot. It's off the road. It's kind of it's sort of tucked away. It's a pretty building. So I just think that we would need to have some ideas from the community as to what they wanted to have there, and then go with that.
Thanks, Larry. George?
It's pretty simple for me. As long as I kept the fire pole and I could go down that once in a while, I'd be for it. Actually, I'm in agreement that the community should decide what it should be. A community center, a meeting space, all those things could be done, but it really should be determined by the community if the fire station goes. And I think it's a historic building and frankly pretty cool looking. So let's keep it. Thank you.
Ruben, your thoughts? You're muted, Ruben.
Okay, so we can't take a look at this parcel independent of the other parcels. So we've got to take a look at where the new fire station is going to be and what's being dislodged there. We've got to know what's going to happen in this new parcel that's just purchased, what's going to happen there, before we can say what's going to happen in this parcel that this fire station is going to leave from. Once again, we know that we need to develop more outdoor recreational activities. The lawn bowling center is in Heisler Park. How successful, how popular is that? Pickleball seems to be the biggest thing right now, and why not put something like that in this area? So what we need to do is keep the health of our city in the forefront of our mind. And if we create these activities for people to be outdoor and exercising, I think both council members, Robert isn't here right now, but they nixed the steps that were at that were at Temple Hills. There was a stairway that was going to come down that I think stairways are great for exercise. And yet, because it was an easement and because some very loud people didn't want that easement to go between their homes, it was given back to these lots. We need to keep it in the forefront of our mind that we need to keep our citizens healthy. And
30 seconds.
By doing as many outdoor activities as we can, and as Steve said earlier also, giving them a place to come together as community and get to know each other, and camaraderie is very important. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you. This is a great follow-up question to number 6 that we were talking about before, and I think that the answer needs to be a follow-up and consistent with what we were talking about before. And I think the starting point is, what does the community want? And the best way to do that is to have a task force, again, consisting of South Laguna residents, and figure out what kinds of uses they think are desirable. And it could be whatever they want. It could be that we have something relating to gardening over there. It could be Susie Q South. It could be recreational purposes. It's what the community wants it to be. We have a great opportunity here, because we were able to find these lots and purchase them, to to do what the South Laguna residents want us to do. So I think the key here is a procedure by which we get full and complete input from the community.
Thank you. So we're going to switch a little bit, go to question 12, which is talking about beach patrol. The officers of the beach patrol were originally intended to provide additional surveillance of beaches, but the remit has gradually widened, and with a consequent reduction in the amount of time they are actually at the shore, with significant consequences for South Laguna's isolated and overcrowded beaches. What would you do to restore and possibly increase the time and attention the beach patrol devotes to patrolling South Laguna shores? I'm clicking my mute button too much. George, you're up first.
Hi. I talked about this earlier in the question of the solutions to balance the visitors out. So I think that beach patrol obviously has to be beefed up. I don't know why it hasn't been. And that's what I would do. You need adequate enforcement, adequate to the problems that you have in South Laguna. And from what I've been seeing from the videos you showed, which I hope you don't put on YouTube anytime soon, you have plenty of visitors and plenty of enforcement issues to deal with. And why the city is not providing those for both these guys jumping off of buildings, for alcohol, and for bad behavior, I don't know, but I would change that. Thank you.
Ruben? Ruben, you're still muted.
I think we see that the allocation of funds is a very important item here. Also, we want to take a look at volunteers. When they first mentioned that we were going to be clearing the beaches at a certain hour during the COVID times, I thought that that was going to be an impossibility, but it proved to be workable. They were going to go down there and out of the beach by 10 o'clock so they could go do their exercise. So it's possible. So what we need to do is to make sure that we have enough personnel to help to monitor these beaches. The beach is our resource. It's really what our whole town is about, our beautiful beaches. For us not to be spending money to monitor and to safeguard that precious resource is kind of foolish. So I would recommend that we do create a larger force to monitor them and then create a volunteer force that supports them so that we have this patrolling that is friendly and kind, but at the same time safe for both the visitors and the residents of Laguna Beach.
Steve?
Okay. As I said earlier, we need to solve the problems that we're talking about. We need a comprehensive and integrated solution through parking and enforcement. So I'll focus on enforcement as that's the nature of the question. What we cannot do is have a whack-a-mole thing. So we put all the resources now in South Laguna to try to solve that, boom, it pops up somewhere else. So we need to be looking at the town as a whole, not just at any one section to solve the problem. How did we get here? Well, the population of Orange County keeps increasing. And then where do they come? They come to Laguna Beach. Social media has identified areas of town that nobody knew about before. And it's not just beaches. It's also the trailways up in top of the world in Arch Beach Heights. People coming there from all over the county. And iPhones, believe it or not, I was told by one of the marine safety people, have been a part of the problem because they help make it easier to identify as you're going through there. And COVID, when the lid lifted, it was like an explosion. That's why we've got the problem. And it's not going to just be South Laguna, it's going to be all over town. We have to increase all our resources for enforcement, police, beach patrol, other creative solutions for it. But if we don't do that, nothing will work, and we will continue to have the problems. We have to put our resources where our problems are.
Thanks, Steve. Larry?
Yeah, I support additional funding to ensure that the beach patrol can devote more time and more attention to all of the beaches, including South Laguna. We clearly have a problem down there. It clearly needs to be monitored. The only way I can think, though, to achieve this is to make sure that we bring in more revenues from visitors. And I think the easiest way to do that, I think, is through parking revenues, through transient occupancy taxes, and through sales taxes. And those are sort of big revenue buckets. So while it seems to sort of breed itself, I think that if we could take more revenues from these and devote more of those revenues to beefing up our beach patrols, I would be in favor of that, because I think the only way that we keep safer, cleaner beaches is by increasing those patrols.
Thank you. We're going to ask kind of a general question now. This is question 13. The city has many needs in terms of capital improvements, and current interest rates for bond financing are at historic lows. Under what circumstances, if any, do you favor the use of debt financing for capital projects? And if you are open to debt financing, for which specific projects would you favor its use? Let's see, Bob's not here, so Ruben. You're muted, Ruben.
I'll get this.
You clicked the mute button again. We haven't heard.
I'm not in favor of debt financing, but if necessary, it would be for those items that are regarding public safety. Public safety is, again, number one. So if something needed to be done because it is going to be for the better good of humans, then it's a no-brainer. But otherwise, I'd like to figure out other potential revenue sources in order to do this. We just mentioned right now charging more taxes from the residents to bring tourists. I think that's a wrong thought. I would rather that we got rid of parking for tourists and then just had less of them here, and therefore we didn't have such an influx. Let them drive down to Dana Point or drive over to Corona del Mar. Let's try first to take care of our own in the efforts to make a better life for those of us that actually live here, and then think about what we need to do for a tourist who we've all acknowledged are spending no dollars in our town. So yes, bring in revenues as they are for what is needed. Go ahead and create funds for way of life, but let's not tax more residents for tourism. Thank you.
Okay, hold on just one sec. I think we may have Bob trying to join in.
Yay,
we're trying to get him in on the phone, so I imagine he's maybe still at the hospital, but I'm gonna get Daniel going on that. Larry, I'm gonna let you answer this question. So go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I hope Ruben didn't misunderstand what I said. The sources of revenue are parking, which is essentially paid for by visitors. Those are metered parking funds. The transient occupancy tax, which are hotel taxes, which are paid for by visitors, and sales taxes that are largely paid for by visitors. So nobody's talking about raising any of those things. We're talking about collecting them and gathering them and using them for things. I am in favor of bond financing, and I think it's necessary when we have infrastructure that we need to address. And part of the infrastructure we need to address is the lack of parking. And so if we could arrange for some bonds, secure some bonds at very favorable rates, and we could handle the debt service through the revenues that are raised through the parking receipts, I think that it would be in the city's best interest to use those parking funds to pay for that debt service, to improve our infrastructure and take care of some needs that we have kicked down the road for since 1986. Thanks.
Okay, George.
Thank you. I think some of the projects that I would fund through bonds are the wastewater treatment plant. We can't have another spill. Our sewage system needs to be upgraded. I would fund that as well through bonds. These are critical infrastructure projects that are long overdue to be replaced and upgraded. I categorically would not support parking structures all over town with bonds. And it's a false notion that these are going to be paid for by sales taxes and meter taxes. Those are $3 million a year that go into our general fund. What else comes out that then we put that $3 million toward parking, which they're probably going to do for the $16 million parking structure downtown. We almost had a bond, $135 million bond if the undergrounding had gone through. We don't want to be bonding ourselves into hock for a long period of time. The sales tax revenue is $6 million a year. That goes into the general fund to be used by us. It pays for visitors' services that they take up, including public works, including public safety. So I'm not a big fan of taking money from one pot and delivering it to parking lots, but I am in favor of bonds for infrastructure.
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Welcome, Bob. Glad you could make it. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're on question 13, and I'm going to let Steve answer so you can get yourself collected, and then you can come in and answer that question. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As a general rule, I am very nervous about the city having debt. I think that what we've just experienced with COVID shows that there's great vulnerability when revenues decrease dramatically. On the other hand, we know that if we want to have a comprehensive solution to the problem of tourists impacting our quality of life, and if we want to ensure that we have the best possible defense against wildfires, we simply may not have the revenue in order to do that. And it may be that bonds will be determined to be necessary. But I strongly prefer that if we're going to think about bonds, that it goes out to a vote of the public and not just be a vote of the council.
Okay, Bob, you're up.
Yes, first of all, thank you, everyone. I'm happy to be here and glad I can participate at least for part of this conversation. Yeah, I think bonds are appropriate in limited situations, and some of what I've heard here tonight is right. I think long-term infrastructure is an appropriate use of it, and you know, I think for things like some of the improvements that we were looking at on Laguna Canyon Road, it could be an appropriate use as well. The revenues that we're talking about using, you know, are essentially would be, you know, in large part visitor generated. When it comes to the parking revenues do not go into the general fund. 725,000 or thereabouts a year gets transferred from the parking revenue fund to the general fund. All the rest of the money stays in the parking fund for transportation and parking related improvements. The parking fund this year, even in the COVID situation, is projected to have at the end of the year almost $2.6 million in it. So we do have an ability to utilize that parking fund. But I think the bonds are appropriate for public safety. For example, rebuilding some of our fire stations. We're looking at a solution for Fire Station 4. That's a long-term, you know, 40 or 50-year improvement. The whole idea behind bonds is when you need them, and Steve said it well, is you don't always have the money to get the improvement you need right now to keep the community safe. Or to provide the necessary infrastructure. So I'd be supportive of using it for parking, and I'd be supportive of using it for public safety measures. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to go to question 2. This is a meaty one. Currently, the city is responsible for police and fire department services, while the county remains in charge of maintenance and lifeguard services, leading to confusion about maintenance, emergency response, and the setting of rules for South Laguna beaches. What is your opinion about ending the split jurisdiction of South Laguna beaches and either bringing them under complete operational control of the city or seeking an alternative joint powers relationship with the county? If this were to happen, would you support retaining the current beach operating hours in South Laguna? Let's go with Steve.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. My preference is that there be one body in charge. My preference, if there's one body in charge, that it be the city. I believe in local control. I don't want to give away control of something so important as this to the county. But to the best of my knowledge, we've not done as good a job as we should have in examining the liability and expenses. I know we're in the process of doing that now. As far as the hours, I would want shorter hours. I think that given the tremendous problem that the day trippers have caused us, that I don't see any reason that we need the hours to start before sunrise or end after sunset. I think it's important to also note that this is a relatively new problem. I'm not saying it's a new problem, but it's a relatively new problem because it's been exacerbated by the conditions I was describing before about the increasing size of the county and the effect of social media and iPhones and the explosive effect that COVID had once it let people out. And so this is something that accelerated when we needed to deal with it, but I think we do need to deal with it. I prefer one jurisdiction. I prefer to be the city. I prefer shorter hours.
Ruben.
I'm not sure that the issue is with the city and or the county. If everybody's role is defined well, we should be able to handle that. So I do like the county's hours better than the city's hours. I agree with Steve that we need to make them shorter. If we have a gate that is on Thousand Steps Beach, why can't we put gates on other beaches so that we can control the movement of people up and down those stairways, especially during COVID times? I understand the desire to have it under our jurisdiction, but once again, we're talking about budgets. We're talking about who has the money. Do we have enough funds to handle that? How many helicopter rescues are we going to make for these numerous people who, as it seems, that they're intoxicated? So I think first we need to handle the people that are on the beach. And then we need to figure out with the county and with the community how we're going to go forward with this. If the county can do a great job, let the county do a great job. If they need our support, let's support them. But it's a big stretch of beach. And right now we're barely handling our own areas. Thank you.
Larry?
Yeah, thanks, James. Based on what I know right now, and just making this decision today and this comment today, I'm not in favor of ending the split jurisdiction. And a lot of it has to do with the financial issue. And I don't disagree at all with what Steve said. It's ideal to have everything sort of under one penumbra. But when we look at the financial costs versus the benefits, maybe the parking revenues at the Aliso lot versus the cost of the lifeguards, et cetera. I think if that cost benefit analysis might change a little bit if the city moved forward with a plan to assume the whole thing. So right now, I think I'm in favor of just keeping it the way that it is, just for a pure financial basis, for reason. But the issue with regard to the hours, I mean, I understand the concern. If this gets turned over to city jurisdiction, all of a sudden the beaches are open till 1 o'clock, and then people who, you know, like John Thomas has visitors now next to his house until 1 in the morning, and now he's only got them till 10. So I understand that concern. So probably retain the shorter hours, keep the county involved, and you know, see where it goes.
Bob?
Yes. You know, I've had a real education in this issue this year because of COVID. And, you know, I had to deal extensively with the county and with the county supervisor, who was really great through the process. But, you know, as we were closing and opening our beaches in the city, you know, this county was doing its own thing. And so we went down. I was able to coordinate with her, get her to agree to open and close the beaches as we open and close them. But and at first, the first move actually was to close off the stairways because of the narrowness. So, you know, we get good cooperation from the county, and our supervisor has been very supportive, but she won't always be our supervisor either. And we're not sure that the next supervisor would be as supportive. And in talking to our marine safety chief and others, it's clear to me that we have to change what we have there currently. You know, whether it's a complete takeover or, you know, some kind of mutual arrangement. I want to see our lifeguards running the beaches. They're going to be far less, I'm convinced there's going to be far less rescues and disasters down there in the water if our guys are running it as opposed to the contract group that the county has. And, you know, we already have our beach patrols down there, so we're managing that aspect of it. You know, so if there's a way we can take over the control of the water, I think that's important. And we already, you know, I think we need to probably add resources on the police beach patrols as well. I'm not sure. Did somebody just say time up? I didn't want to overstep.
You still have a few more seconds. She'll tell you when your time's up.
All right. You know, so I'd like to go that direction, explore it financially. Definitely don't extend the time on the beaches. I mean, what's evident to us is a lot of our problems are happening after dark, not just in South Laguna, but up and down the beaches. So, you know, it's a balancing act. We'll see if we could work something out.
George?
Thank you, James. You know, the county, I would have to, there are a lot of questions here. I don't know if joint control would actually work. I would favor, you know, is it working elsewhere, I'd ask. I don't know. I'd rather have Laguna step up and control with the county providing adequate financial subsidies. That would be ideal. I'd certainly support maintaining the beaches currently operating hours, but I think Coastal has an involvement in this as well. So we have to negotiate with them as well. But on that question, I think it's a problem, as Bob pointed out, the nighttime problems are very serious and problematic. So reducing the hours would be a great way if we could do it. I don't know if we can do that either, but I would support controlling the beaches, because if we can't control them, we don't control our destiny and the service level that we want to provide to residents and visitors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to ask another non-South Laguna specific question. I'm going a little out of order here, but we're going to, this is question 14. In the normal course of fulfilling their duties, elected and appointed officials may find that they have explicit or implicit conflicts between their personal interests and the duties of their office. The city has guidelines and procedures to avoid having elected and appointed officials voting on matters in which they may have an explicit or implicit interest. Nonetheless, opportunities for self-dealing are difficult to avoid, not only in cases of the council's direct decisions, but also in regard to appointments to the Planning Commission and to the Design Review Board. On what sorts of matters do you expect to find yourself with potential conflicts of interest, and what extent do you think those conflicts may affect your ability to fulfill the duties of a city councilor? Let's go with Ruben.
I would love to opine on everything that comes forward. I think as a potential city council member, you're yearning to add your 2 cents to support your thoughts for the community. And obviously you also are the speaker for a collective few of your friends and areas that you frequent. As a store owner presently, I don't know how much that would come into the jurisdiction problem. Obviously, Peter Blake right now has a 300-foot jurisdiction where he can't speak about many things downtown. Currently, I'm off to the north side, so that wouldn't harm the issues downtown. So I don't see that it would be too much of a problem with me. I know that I would love to make sure that the city was taken care of correctly. Thank you.
Bob? Yes, thanks, James. Yeah, having been on for 8 years, I really haven't had, I'm trying to think, maybe 1 or 2 situations where I determined that I wanted to recuse myself. It arises for me probably in situations which are rare, where somebody in our law firm is maybe somebody with an item of business before the city is represented by somebody else in our law firm, my law firm. I don't represent anybody doing business with the city, but they may, so our firm does no work for the city, but it may be a situation where somebody's representing a resident or a resident who has a business, and then that resident shows up at DRB or planning. And I think I've had 1 or 2 situations where I've said, it's not a legal conflict of interest, but it's just the appearance of a conflict. So I recused myself. But it's rare. I don't expect it to arise very often. It hasn't in 8 years, so it should be fairly infrequent.
George?
Okay, well, I don't think I have any potential conflicts at all. I've retired 5 years ago. And so I don't have any business with the city, don't own a business in town. I'm pretty much completely independent. And that's my sole purpose in running, to represent residents. So 0 conflicts of interest. Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, in the 8 years since Bob and I each got elected in 2012, I don't think I've had to recuse myself once. Nature of my legal practice with intellectual property tends to be that we represent businesses and that are not located in Laguna Beach. So I don't foresee that changing in the future.
Larry? Yeah, before I decided to run, I spent a lot of time speaking with the FPPC people because, as you know, I do own a house in town. I think everybody owns a house in town, so that gives rise to an issue with regard to proximity. But I also own a business that is close to the downtown, and the question is, does that automatically give rise to a conflict of interest whenever something comes up in that regard? And in looking at and studying over the last 6 months the issues that have come before the council, I've taken those issues to the FPPC and said, okay, in this situation, would I be able to vote on this, or would I have to recuse myself? And I was given just a fallaciously great answer. Sorry. Before I decided to run, I spent a lot of time on the phone with the FPPC, and what I would do is I would go through council agendas and look at things and then apply them to myself. As many people know, I own a building here where my law office is. I also own a home in town, and I have some clients in town. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to do anything that had anything to do with those clients. So to the extent they brought something before the city council, I would have to recuse myself if I had represented any of their interests within any of that decision. But conflicts of interest is something that I think you have to evaluate every single time an issue comes up. It's not a line I want to get close to, and it's certainly not a line I will ever cross. I'm in close consultation with the FPPC because it's important. There are some issues that will be coming before us that are going to be interesting, and then you have to weigh whether or not it just one. Can I just have 1 second because I was muted for so long, and that was my bad. I apologize. But whether or not the proximity of my building would have any kind of an impact on my ability to vote, and that gets into an exception called the public generally exception, which we would have to evaluate in each one of those. But right now, in dealing with the FPPC, I don't see it as being a big issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Okay, so we have gone through this. We have one more question remaining. We may as well ask it. It's amazing to me, but good job, guys. This is question 10. Upon incorporation into the city in 1987, South Laguna lost its right to vote in the elections to the board of the South Coast Water District. What are your views on restoring the right of citizens of South Laguna to vote directly for the board of the South Coast Water District? George?
I believe in equal representation for anything. And if if that jurisdiction, the South Coast Water District, affects your community, South Laguna, then you should have a say. That's an elemental form of democracy, which we should all honor. So I would support it unequivocally that residents of South Laguna should have a seat at the table there. Thank you.
Steve?
Thank you. I seem to remember from elementary school history class that revolutions have been fought about the idea of no taxation without representation. This is absolutely outrageous and offensive. It's a great injustice. I can't even understand as a lawyer how it could be possibly legal that they're not allowed to vote. It's one thing to say we're a minority and our votes don't add up to a lot within the whole thing, but to not even be allowed to vote on an organization that has the ability to tax you is just unbelievable to me. The question is, and I'm sure everybody feels that way, I think the real question is, what can we do about it? I'm just not sure what leverage the city has other than maybe moral persuasion. But other than that, I don't know what the city can do about it.
Larry?
Yeah, this one is just one that makes no damn sense. I mean, so when you remember when they were doing all the sewer dig up for the tunneling and all of that stuff and the lot and the staging area and all that stuff, that impacts South Laguna. And why South Laguna, who's got such a big dog in that race, wouldn't be able to vote on things that might impact the use of its streets, the use of its neighborhoods, the ability to sleep at night while construction is going on. I just don't get it. So I don't know what we can do, but I would be in favor of South Laguna being able to vote on those issues.
Ruben?
Same as everybody else. It's a no-brainer. Just a natural that they should be able to vote. And like everybody else says, we just got to figure out how to make that a reality. Thank you.
And Bob?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to break the trend here. I agree with everybody else. It's hard to imagine making the case for not being able to vote for representatives on a public agency that, you know, affect your, as others have pointed out, can charge you monthly fees. I mean, I understand that you know, there may be a move afoot to go to district elections in South Coast Water District, meaning they carve up the areas and create representatives. And certainly if they're going to be looking at that, I think one thing we could do, I'm not sure we have any legal standing to do it, but we could certainly get on our soapbox and as a city council or city council members, you know, lobby to say, you know, however that process works out, there should absolutely be, you know, equal voting rights for people in South Laguna. So there may be an opportunity presenting itself through the districting redistricting effort they're considering.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank all of you guys for attending. I learned a lot, and I'm sure that we had over 120, 130 people in through most of this. So it's a well-attended deal, and we're going to put it up on YouTube so that it can be watched later by people who are probably at the school one as well. But I really thank all of you for taking the time and making the effort and going through our 12-page document here. And I also want to thank Cindy, who was our timer, and Daniel for helping us run this, and look forward to the election. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Good job, James.
Thanks, Cindy.